The following is a presentation of the Mat Talk Podcast Network.
Episode 642 of the Short Time Wrestling Podcast. This one a little shorter than normal, one that wasn't initially on my radar, but I received an email from the National Wrestling Hall of Fame from legendary professional wrestler Robert Remus. You might know him as Sergeant Slaughter. Here's the Sarge remembering the late, great Danny Hodge.
Hey, I'm Sergeant Slaughter. As all of you, I was very sad to hear the passing of our friend Danny Hodge on Christmas. My sincere condolences and heartfelt sympathies go out to his family and friends. You may be gone from our sight, Danny, but you will never be gone from our hearts. Rest in peace. In the 1960s, when I was a young fan of professional wrestling in Minnesota, Danny Hodge came to wrestle frequently for Vern Gagne's AWA wrestling promotion, defending the World Junior Heavyweight Championship that he won that summer from Angelo Savolti, if my memory serves me correctly. My father, Rudy, and I always enjoyed watching Danny's matches, and we instantly became fans of Danny. I always remembered that Danny was introduced from Perry, Oklahoma, and that he had that trademarked cauliflower ear. Back when my dad and I watched the live AWA television matches on Saturday night, the wrestlers were always interviewed following their matches by veteran interviewer Marty O'Neill. Danny was such a humble, soft-spoken man, and it would take Marty half the opening of the interview to complete Danny's amateur and professional accomplishments, not only in wrestling, but also in boxing. Marty would usually run out of time interviewing Danny, but Marty would always ask Danny before the end of the interviews to demonstrate feats of strength that Danny had in his hands. Danny would crush apples, break pliers, destroy other tools and objects with his hands. Danny did it time after time with ease, using little or no effort. My father and I thought we had strong hands, milking 30 cows every day by hand, twice a day, but we were in complete awe with Danny's strength when we would try those same feats of strength that Danny performed, and my dad and I would laughingly surrender as we failed over and over every time. Forwarding to 1972, when I went through my pro wrestling training camp with Vern Gagne and Billy Robinson in Minnesota, and after my pro wrestling career debut in 1973, and the name Danny Hodge was mentioned everywhere my travels took me. That same name, Danny Hodge, was used over and over in our highly esteemed business with the highest regard and acclaim on what professional wrestlers should look to as their ultimate role model, both inside and outside the prestigious squared circle. In 1975, my pro wrestling journeys brought me down to Louisiana and to Mid-South Wrestling, where I was introduced to one of my childhood idols, and I immediately went searching for a payphone to call and share with my hero up on the farm in Minnesota the special honor I just had meeting one of our heroes, Danny Hodge. Soon after my meeting with Danny, I immediately learned that Danny's handshake was legendary. It would be a pleasant or a not so pleasant experience, depending on whether you had a respectable regard for his business, whether you had a reputable amateur background, if you had a good guy stature, or if Danny just wanted to play a little cat and mouse with you. When Danny accepted your hand for a handshake, it was like placing your hand in an unlocked vice grip. Rest assured, the first squeeze of his hand always had you on the tips of your toes. You just hoped that Danny was in a good mood, which was pretty much most of the time, or that Danny just plain out liked you. After a few months working for the Mid-South promotions, I found myself standing across the ring from one of my childhood heroes, Danny Hodge. Wow. Danny and I had many classic confrontations, but our matches always started with a little amateur wrestling shoot. And yes, I was humbled by every move and by each hold Danny put on me that, of course, I could never escape from. Yet another example of Danny's cat and mouse games. After those initial little shoot matches strictly for Danny's entertainment, we would always settle down and get into creating a work of art on any canvas we put our wrestling boots on. After several months of working every night, which usually included 2 matches on Saturdays, 2 matches on Sundays, and learning so much from Danny in those matches on how to become a ring general, it did take long for the Mid-South promotions to decide it was time for Danny and I to make a move out of the semi-main event position and into the main event position. So with the promotion's orchestration, and I'm pretty sure Danny's approval, Danny and I, Big Bob Slaughter, pre-Sarge and Slaughter days, were sent into a different direction. The first creative plan by Mid-South Promotion had me catching a very controversial victory over Danny with the help of my manager and, of course, the ever-present blind referee. Just before a riot was about to ensue in the arena, a rematch with Danny and I was announced to take place inside the dreaded steel cage, to the delight and pleasure of all those not-so-happy fans in attendance. The event was broadcasted and scheduled to take place at that same arena in a few weeks' time. Needless to say, before the announcement was made, my manager and I had a pretty rough time getting out of that ring and back to the locker room that night. Leaving the arena to get to our cars and get out of town was no picnic either. Thankfully, with the help from a few of the boys, Bob Sweethand's nightstick, Killer Carl Cox's snub-nosed little equalizer friend, I was soon on my long drive back to Shreveport. I remember on my drive back thinking how well everything went that night. But then it crossed my mind, wait a minute. When I returned back to this town that I just escaped from by the skin of my teeth, I have a date with Danny Hodge in a cage match. Then thoughts of what my manager and I had to endure after the match with Danny crossed my mind, and it was all worth it. As a smile came across my face, thinking that I was on my way into the hallowed main event position, and I was doing it with the help of my idol, my hero, Mr. Danny Hodge. I couldn't have been more pleased, but unfortunately, that rematch with Danny and I never happened. In fact, I never stepped back into the squirt circle ever again with Danny. After our match that night on Danny's drive back to Shreveport, Danny was involved in a horrible car crash. His car rolled down an embankment, and his car landed upside down in a creek. In the crash, Danny broke his neck. After regaining consciousness, Danny told me that he heard a voice telling him to hold his neck up. Danny managed to bust out a window of the car, battled his way out of that mangled wreck, and crawled back up the hill, still holding his neck in his hand, as a voice in his head kept telling him to do. Danny was able to get a trucker to stop and help him get to a hospital. In many people's opinion, they thought Danny Hodge's career was over. But to Danny's credit, to his athletic ability, and to his incredible strength, Danny amazingly stepped back into the squared circle once again 7 years later in 1983. Anytime my schedule allowed my paths to cross with Danny's, it was always a fun and wonderful reunion of reminiscing together. To this date, I'm not really sure why, but after all the years I've known Danny Hodge, he never gave me his infamous vice grip handshake. Or did he ever ask me for a rematch from our last match together on March 15, 1976? Lucky me. The world is a better place because you were in it, Danny Hodge. And I was truly blessed that wonderful Louisiana winter morning in 1975 when we met. I will miss you and our chats very much, Mr. Hodge. There will never, ever be another one like you. I'm not sure why, but I'm guessing God needed a very special angel to shake the devil's hand. Good luck with that one, Lucifer. Godspeed, Danny Hodge, my friend. Wishing you all a happy, safe, and prosperous New Year. Hope to see you all on July 15th to the 17th in Waterloo, Iowa. And congrats to Mr. Dan Gable on receiving the 2020 Presidential Medal of Freedom Award. Pretty damn incredible and very well deserved. Now, if there's no further questions, you're dismissed.
The Short Time Wrestling Podcast is proudly outfitted by Compound Sportswear. Shirts, singlets, custom gear orders, everything you need. Call up Cliff and the crew at cmpteamwear.com. Hey, you know what? Did you like the show? You want to hit that subscribe button? MatTalkOnline.com/listen. Various different ways to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcatcher of choice. And if you're already subscribed, you're already listening, you love the show, and you want to support this show and this network, MatTalkOnline.com/join the team. Become a team member today.